Welcome to In the Black, the podcast that shines a light on resilience, transformation, and the power of reinvention. I'm Araceli, and each week, my co host Shannon and I sit down with incredible women who face some of life's hardest challenges, from personal setbacks to societal obstacles, and have emerged on the other side stronger, driven, and ready to make a difference.
On In the Black, we celebrate these stories of strength and success, diving deep into the journeys of women who turned pain into purpose, adversity into action, and now dedicate themselves to making the world a better place in their own way. They're here to inspire, share hard earned wisdom, and remind us all no matter how dark things may seem, life is cyclical and dawn is coming. So, whether you're looking for inspiration, motivation, or just a reminder that change is always possible, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to In the Black.
Welcome to our episode today. Today we have Alexandra, a mentor, public speaker, a holistic wellness practitioner who has made it her life's mission to empower others in embracing their unique rhythm. Alexandra's journey to self love and personal development is a story of immense resilience, overcoming the scars of early childhood trauma, facing deaths, illnesses, abuse, and battling through heroin addiction, prison, multiple suicide attempts, and countless abusive relationships. She has emerged as a confident leader. Now she channels her hard earned wisdom into guiding others towards healing and transformation. As a published author, professional artist, multifaceted musician, and outdoor trail guide, Alexandra integrates her diverse skills to offer a holistic approach to wellness. Through her work, she inspires others to rise above life's challenges and step into their fullest potential. Her dedication to personal growth, paired with her deep compassion for others, makes Alexandra a truly powerful source for change. Welcome, Alexandra, to our podcast. So, Alexandra, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I never really know where to begin when people ask me to tell them things about me. There's a lot to me. I was I was raised in a family that went through an incredible amount of difficulty. Um, my family was very beautiful and together, and they were big advocates for change and kindness, and we were always doing community service and trying to help other people in need. And when I was 7, my dad passed very suddenly, which for any kid is a huge shock to the sense of security and safety, especially losing that male presence in the family. And for whatever reason, I took it on as my own personal responsibility to carry the weight of my family. From that point forward, it was just me, my mom, and my sister. Um, and that kind of split my personality into a million different pieces. And very shortly after that, I was 12 years old. My mom was diagnosed with stage 4 brain and lung cancer, and they only gave her a few months to live. But my mom, being the warrior that she was, she managed to hang on for an additional 19 years. She's actually in medical journals because she just defied all odds. Um, so throughout my life, I've had to draw on that strength a lot on my own, and there was a lot that I had to go through to get to the point that I'm at today. A lot of hard learned lessons. I had a lot of really poor coping skills that came out very, very early. So, drug addiction, codependency, um, bouncing from one relationship to another, never really finding that rhythm of my own drum, just kind of going with whatever was going on around me. But I was always so soft and so gentle. It kind of drew in those darker characters into my world that like to abuse softness, and that was a theme that went on long, long into adulthood. Um, like I said, I was addicted to heroin at one point. I was actively trying to end my own life every single day. I was in relationships with people who were telling me I wasn't pretty, I wasn't smart, I wasn't talented. I threw away all of my creative gifts like writing, like music, drawing and art. And it took a lot to try and reclaim all of that, especially, I became a criminal for a little while. To do heroin, you have to do some hard things sometimes. I'd stolen from people. I spent time in jail, and I couldn't even get a job at Dunkin' Donuts after I got out of prison. I was having a really, really hard time finding work. And it was difficult for me because at one point I was a college student with a 4.0, so it was very difficult for me to learn how to love myself where I was at in those moments. And over like throughout my 20s and into my early 30s, I really started stepping more and more into my own personal power. I started sharing my gifts again, like a little bit at a time. Um, and as time went on, that self-esteem just kind of built a little bit more and a little bit more, uh, and it wasn't easy by any means because when so many people have such a strong perception of who you are and how you've been showing up in the world, it's not always easy to step into what's really going on inside of you, like that actual sense of self that you know to be true. So I had to go up against some pretty strong adversaries. I ended up getting a job working in treatment, helping other addicts, and I loved it. I loved what I did. I loved helping. I found out I was very gifted in helping. I was very gifted in de escalation and grounding, reading energy, and all kinds of wonderful things. But I was working for a system that is incredibly broken, and I realized very quickly that I was not able to help people the way that I felt like people needed to be helped. So I took a step away from that. There's actually a psychic on the New Jersey boardwalk that told me to quit my job in treatment and buy a tattoo machine. And at that point, I did art for fun. I had never thought about making a career out of it. And I ended up being booked out within a month of buying the tattoo machine. I was very quick to get very good. I had a full clientele. I was exhausted almost immediately. Um, and once again, I found myself just around the wrong people that wanted to take advantage of my kindness and my light and my softness. So I had to quick make a duck out of that, and that was really difficult because I had built a really strong career, I was making really, really good money, and I had to make a really tough decision, realizing that it wasn't aligning with my soul. Everyone was so confused. Why would you give up, um, a lucrative career? Why would you give up your sense of safety? I had this big, beautiful house. I had a lot of responsibilities. And I decided I just needed to let it all go. I was like, no, this is not my path. This is not what I'm meant to be doing. And I was so fortunate because I ended up realizing just a year before my mom passed, like this calling to help, this calling to like share my love and my truth with the world. And our relationship, it had been rocky, and that young little kid that was so afraid of losing their mom was finally acknowledging that's why our relationship was so strained for so many years. So I was directed to my mom almost a year exactly before she passed, to heal that relationship. And we ended up having the most beautiful year together before she passed. I showed up for every holiday, every every chance I could do to even just like take out the garbage or do the dishes. And there was a really clear transference of energy that was happening. My mom's love and goodness and strength and courage, it was all being transferred to me and I could feel it. And a week before she passed, she said, you need to step into this fully. You need to share this love with the world. You need to share this softness with the world because it matters. And she knew I had been writing poetry again, and she had a very strong request. She was like, "You need to publish your book." So that's what I did. I published a book, and that ended up publishing not intentionally, but it ended up being published a year to the date after her passing, which was really incredible. And from that moment forward, I have just dedicated every moment to helping in whatever way that happens. Sometimes that's in a session with somebody, sometimes that's in a workshop, sometimes that's in a speaking commitment. And sometimes it's just showing up in my community and doing what I believe is important, picking up garbage on the side of the road. I just recently formed a little group of people in my neighborhood, and we're going and doing transports from different pantries to local homeless shelters. And we have all of these wonderful things in place to start doing fundraising for families that are in need right now. So anywhere I can fill that need, I do, you know. And most recently, I just was offered the most wonderful position. I'm going to Spain at the end of the month, to be a holistic life coach for kids in their gap year of college while they're away abroad in Spain. So I'll be doing that for a few months. So everything has just kind of been leading me down this wonderful path of learning how to say yes to life and learning to love that life and really understanding what it means to be a human being here on this planet with a heart that's so willing to share and, do good in the world. It's important, and it feels like my mission here to encourage other people to do the same, that they can do the same, that you can come from the lowest of lows, and make something special of your life. Um, yeah, that was a pretty decent ramble, I'd say.
I love that. I think you did an amazing summary and introduction of yourself.
Thank
Made it
you.
really easy for us.
Long introduction.
I love it. I mean, let me just say, first of all, what a beautiful human. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. And so I want to dissect a little bit more and just take us step by step through, the rough time to the middle and to the end where you are just shining joy and love and peace to everyone that you meet. So take us back to your early childhood trauma, death, illnesses, abuse. What is happening in your life at that time? And then how did that impact you during that moment?
So there was a lot. You know, Losing my dad, I don't think I ever gave myself the space to really process that, to feel that. I was so young. I was 7 years old. So my sister was 4 years older than me, and my mom was clearly a wreck. She had just lost her husband. So my feelings immediately were just kind of pushed to the side. And I did that intentionally, and I see that now. But that pattern just kind of continued, and it was really difficult because it was a traumatic experience, not just for me, but for my sister and for my mom. It was difficult. Me and my sister had found my dad, when he initially went down. He died of a massive heart attack, so we were the ones to discover his body. It was really, really traumatic, and I remember my mom taking me to a therapist after everything had kind of slowed down, and I sat down with the therapist, and I don't have much recollection of this, but apparently the man went back out and said, "There's absolutely nothing wrong with your daughter. She's dealing with all of this fine." Which, that was me protecting myself and not tapping into those feelings, and then, to have my mom get diagnosed with cancer very shortly after that, it was so difficult for me to give space for my feelings. I just felt such a strong responsibility to, like, take care of the family, so if my sister was crumbling, if my mom was crumbling, like, that meant I had to be the strong one, and I think because my sister was a little bit older, she had, like, a much more outward reaction to all of the trauma, um, and it was, like, a little bit easier for her to get the help that she needed, and because she was going through so much, I just diminished everything that I was experiencing and said, "Okay, like, we'll deal with that when we deal with that, but for now, we have to show up and be there for our family." And it was just, like, one thing swinging into another, and I actually recently thought about this because not long after my mom got diagnosed with cancer, 2 of my best friends also died of an overdose on the same day, and I was 16, and I remembered being at their funeral and actually, like, crying, crying for the first time, um and my mom was there with me, like, holding me and, like, supporting me through this moment, and I was thinking about it recently, like, how it was so strange that I was able to mourn their losses, like, out loud, but not the losses that were really, really close, to my heart, so it affected me in a lot of ways, it was a really long time before I was able to show emotion in front of other people. It was kind of just, really, really shut down, and I think anyone who has experience in doing that, like, you almost need outside things to be able to shut down that heavy of an emotion, so I think that's where the drugs came in, the codependency, the awful relationships. Because if I was at least focusing outward while numbing, then none of that felt as heavy to hold and carry. I think I had already isolated my feelings as, like, a separate entity, um, but they were always there and they were always being dragged behind me, and I think after dragging those emotions behind me for so long and not feeling like I was worthy of feeling those feelings and expressing those feelings, it really did a lot to my sense of self-worth and self-esteem, and then, to add such significant abuse. Like, I was in a relationship with somebody for 3 years where every single day I was being told how awful I was. I was forced to sit on the floor, because I was dirty. I wasn't allowed to sit on the bed. I was physically abused as well, but it felt like nothing in comparison to that mental abuse. Um, and I think because I was having so many difficulties with my identity that when somebody else was telling me who they thought I was, I just immediately took that on. And because I was doing things that were totally out of alignment with who I was, like stealing and lying to people and, being a drug addict, it's ugly. It's so ugly that that just turned into this deep seated self-hatred, and the emotions were so difficult to carry that the only way that they came out were it was like in these really self-deprecating kind of ways where I was either self-harming or, just screaming at myself in the mirror. I was so angry with who I had become, because it was so far from who I actually am. And I knew that. I always had a really strong moral compass. So, um, stealing felt awful. I barely slept at all, like, in the years that I was, doing drugs and was involved in that lifestyle. The guilt was, like, eating me alive from the inside out, and it really made me feed into that end your life kind of narrative, like, you don't deserve to be here. Um, and then spending time in prison, that just really I had heard a lot about people going to jail and what their experiences were like, and this was, like, my first offense. I had gotten arrested at Walmart stealing, the police made it seem like they were just gonna give me a slap on the wrist and let me go, and I ended up in jail, and I spent 12 days in a turtle suit, and that's like a suicide smock that they give to people, when they feel like their safety is at risk. So, you don't have clothes, you don't have toilet paper in your cell, you don't have blankets or sheets. You're given one really hard blanket, and you have this little, like, Velcro jumper on, um, and it was brutal. I kept asking, like, "Hey, like, what's going on? Why am I in this thing?" And I kept getting pushed to the side, and they were like, "Well, the psych doctor quit the day you came in. We don't have anyone to clear you from the suit." So every single day, it was just like, "Just be quiet, just stay in your cell." I was in there for 7 days before I was let out to shower one time. And in the 12 days I was in there, that was the only time I left my cell other than when they were doing strip searches on me, or the one time I got to leave to go meet my attorney, which they took me out in the turtle suit and walked me past all the men, and then I got to go sit down with this man in a jumper without wearing underwear. Like, it was absolutely degrading, um, and I felt so grateful to have that experience because I was under the impression that people go to jail and it's like orange is the new black, like we're all hanging out and it's fun and we're on the pod, and like that was not my experience at all. Like I was abused in there too, you know? So the feelings of like just there was just no sense of worthiness at all. It was very isolating, and most of my life has felt very isolating, and I used to look at isolation as a form of punishment. Now I have a totally different view of what isolation is. I actually really, really enjoy my alone time, but yeah, it was there was a lot of pain. There was a lot of pain in there that that made me feel very, very small, very small.
I can definitely relate to that. I actually went to jail as well one time. I don't know if
Mm.
you know this, Araceli. Um, but we had a domestic dispute, my husband and I, and both ended up in jail for it. But I had attempted suicide not too long before that. And so I was locked up in the cell completely by myself. Thankfully, it was only a few days. I think it was like Friday to Monday, and my sister came and got me out. Um, but yeah, it's pretty rough. Um, and so but I have this saying, the best worst day and the worst best day, because I thought that my wedding was the best day of my life. And it obviously led down this road to pretty terrible things with my ex husband. And then the worst best day was the day that he threw me off the balcony and I left in an ambulance because everyone would see that as the worst day of your life. But in reality, that was the turning point for me so that I could actually build something from that. Do you have a worst best day that you can recall where you decided, I am done with this?
Wow. I feel like my whole life has just been a collection of worst, best days. I think I think it was honestly, I think it came this last year. And it's happened in a collection of moments for sure where um, where I've finally decided like it's time to stand up for yourself. Time to speak your truth. But I think this year, letting go of my house and all of that ego, um, and all of that like darkness that came along with that ego, um, I think that was because it proved to me like I can do anything. Because there was a moment where I was almost fearful that I was going to end up being homeless. And this is like after I've accomplished all of these incredible, wonderful things. And now I'm making the decision to let go of everything that's brought me safety, um, and it's led to such big, big transformations, you know? It's I really truly, after getting through that, nothing will stop me, and I'm well aware of that, that there's absolutely nothing that I cannot get through and get through better because of it. I think that's where my perspective shifted a lot too, where other people were really having a hard time understanding how I was so calm and collected throughout these big, like, "Oh, wow," because a lot of people have tried harming me this year, surprisingly enough, you know, kick them while they're down kind of thing. And I've just kind of been easing through all of it with so much grace, and I say that, like, giving myself a pat on the back because most people would have really lashed out, and I've just been under such strict rule with myself that, like, you will be rewarded for this kindness. You will be rewarded for this kindness. Don't step out of character. You're not supposed to step. That's not your story. Um, because I think a lot of people want that to become your story, you know, especially when they're used to you being one way, and you're showing up in a new way. So I'd say that that's my moment, I guess, just that I can do anything. And I've been proving to myself from that moment forward, because people were really like, she's lost her mind. Like she's totally lost her mind. She's gone insane. And like the month after I let go of everything, I ended up in Alaska. You know, I've had like all of these like wonderful opportunities just like fall in my lap, just, you know, trusting that okay, like my intuition is telling me to make this insane decision that nobody else agrees with. I'm going to do it, and every time I do it, I'm led to these wonderful experiences. So, yeah, yeah.
That reminds me so much of the year that I quit my job in
Mhm.
2019. I had a great corporate job, and everybody was just like, "Oh, you're just living the dream now." And I had gone to college and I'd worked so hard to get this job. And I remember walking into my boss's office and I was like, "I think I need to go home." And she was like, "For the day?" And I was like, "No, forever." And everybody thought I was absolutely insane. And they were like, "What are you gonna do?" And I was like, "I don't know. I like to paint, I like to write, probably something with that." And my kids and I got to go on, I think, 5 trips that year, and, it was just absolutely beautiful, the synchronicity of just, like, letting go and being in the flow of what I was supposed to be doing,
Mhm.
and, definitely made a huge difference, and now I'm kind of back in a place where I'm like, "Hmm, what decision should I be making here?"
Mhm.
So, it's kind of funny how that cycle goes.
Yeah.
But so I'm really curious. So I love to study words and how we talk to ourselves and how we allow other people to talk to us. So when you're going through, I guess from the time that you were 7 until you decided to really get out of that, there were probably some words that you chose to use about yourself and that you allowed other people to use about you. And I'm curious how you're going about changing that in your own mind. Is that something where you're taking those words and you're making them into something that is neutral? Are you trying to like just overload with positive? What are you doing in order to change your mindset?
So it's actually funny. That's another thing I got a lot of heat for the past few years, but I was like a really solid member of Narcotics Anonymous for a long time. And then at some point I realized like how damaging it was for me to like every day go into a room and say like, "Hey, I'm an addict," because that no longer fit anything about who I was, how I was thinking, how I was behaving. Because I've done so much work with reframing, and like I don't like to throw out things like and pretend like they don't exist. I don't like bypassing at all. But I am a huge fan of talking nicely to myself. my book is called To Self with Love. So, like, it would be a little, I would feel a little bit hypocritical if I wasn't practicing these things. But something I actually ended up doing accidentally, this was a total accident because, I was in therapy for years and years and years. I knew about affirmations and how, we should be saying nice things to ourselves in the mirror and doing all of that. It's so cheesy and it's so hard to break through that when you have so much negative chatter going on in your head. And I had just gotten out of a really rough breakup, probably number, 47 of the awful breakups. And I was driving down the road and I was listening to some really like sad breakup music. And I was like, no, just stop. So I put on this super happy playlist that I had made for myself. And the song, You Make My Dreams Come True, that was playing. And I was singing it and like having a great time in my car, and I ended up looking at myself in my rearview mirror while I was singing this song. And then it became this whole it's like a ritual now that I do where I put on the cheesiest love songs every single day and I get in the mirror and I sing them to myself like I'm my greatest lover. Um, and it's like become the way I think now. And now it's gotten to the point where when people say something negative about me, I immediately go into like grandmother stance where it's like, oh, sweet honey, like what is so unhealed within you that this is where you're at right now, and like it's genuine, it's real, but like I've managed to be able to catch my own thoughts because obviously like I had obsessive thinking at one point. I was a drug addict, I was a codependent, like everything that I knew was obsession. And now like there's not an obsessive thought in my head. I've gotten so good at like hearing it come in, as it's coming, and I'm just, like, immediately lassoing it down and saying, like, "What are we doing here?" And then I immediately, like, start reprogramming and, like, talking nicely to my inner child, like, the reparenting process is so important, even if we had great parents, because like, I really did have very loving, kind parents, but there's always that stuff that gets through, and I used to run groups on this all the time. Like human beings, we so naturally have this little index roller of every single negative thing that every person has ever said to us. And we're way quicker to go to that index roller than we are to all of the positive things that people have said about us. Um, and like that's no fault of our own. We think we can like somehow beat ourselves into submission by talking negatively to ourselves. It's not the way it works. So I've just gotten really, really good at understanding the way my mind likes to try and take me out into left field. Um, and it just doesn't work anymore, like my brain just doesn't go there. It no longer has that sense of what you're doing in this moment is wrong. And even when I am doing really outlandish things, because I'm like very, very, very authentic in who I am. I'm a goofball. I like to be strange and weird and out there. Um, because it feels good. And I just talk to myself so nicely now that like I could care less what's going on outside of me or like how you're reacting to who I am. I love self-love. I love self-love a lot. So I'm always just trying to remind myself um like an incredible strange little enigma I am. That's probably one of my favorite words to describe myself is enigmatic. Um,
I love that.
yeah.
I love the storytelling that you are
Mm,
capable of doing. It
yeah.
just takes us into your whole like world and the transformation that you are sharing with us. And I just wanted to follow up with the moment that led you to empowering others to follow their own unique rhythm. Was there a specific moment that sparked this change, or was it a gradual realization?
Yeah, I mean, I've had that call since I was a kid that I knew I was going to be in this role. My name actually means protector of man, so I always felt like I had this like strong call to action, but I also learned um it's really hard to help people before we've learned to help ourselves. Um and I think it was like especially like right around when my mom and I were healing our relationship a lot, um, how strong like that call really started to become. Because I started to see the value in the kind of unconditional love that I had. I'm very gifted in seeing, so I've always felt kind of almost like trapped in this reality, right? Where I have such a clear vision of who people are, and I'm able like very, very easily able to pick up on patterns and unhealthy coping mechanisms that are playing out. I'm really good at doing the backtracking thing where I figure out the things that are behind the words. And I'm really good at that unraveling process. And I think just the longer I've been alive on this planet, the more that gift develops. And like over the last few years, it's really just been popping off to the point where a lot of the times I'm channeling with people and I don't realize I'm channeling with people until after the fact. And they said, "How did you know to say that one thing?" Or, "How were you able to feel that thing that like, nobody else has ever seen before?" And like, there's value in that. And I know that there's value in that. So I've been kind of just on this mission to be like, "Hey guys, like I see you and I love you exactly as you are." Like that's important because I think there are a lot of people that are gifted enough to see people fully for who they are, but there aren't a lot of people that are able to show up with patience and unconditional love to hold people in whatever space they're in. And I think there's like a natural something inside of me that allows people to do this because I'll be in the grocery store and people are telling me their deepest, darkest secrets. And sometimes they are incredibly dark. Um, but I have no judgment. There's absolutely no judgment in my heart for anybody. Um, because I understand how could I judge anyone with where I've been? So it kind of gives me this great opportunity not only to like be able to see others fully, but to be able to see myself in them. I really feel like I've lived a billion lifetimes in one small lifehood. I'm only 33 years old. So, like I've managed to live a lot of lives really early. And I don't think this is my only round at this. I think I've done this a few in the past too. But yeah, so it feels selfish of me not to help, and that's what I was feeling while I was tattooing, where it was like, "Oh my gosh, like, this gift I have, like, I'm seeing people so clearly, and I'm seeing their energy so clearly." Um, I wanna be able to help, and that's why I got certified. I have, like, 13 certifications in coaching and energy work because I needed people to understand, like, "Yes, I'm qualified to do this, please let me help you," you know? Um yeah, it's all I care about doing is helping people get to, like, their own because people are so incredible. We're capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for, and a lot of the times people just need that remembering that, like, they're capable of doing more than what they're settling with. Um, I see it all the time with people where, there's all these like programs that are just like sticking them to these realities that they don't actually want or care for at all. Um, but people forget like it's okay to expand, it's okay to grow outside of your comfort zones, it's okay to like be bigger than what the world is telling you you are because we're capable of that. We're capable of doing these like incredible things, but we have to have the belief that, like, that's true. My mom was the perfect example, like, doctors told her she was gonna die, she said, "No way, I'm not," and she didn't. I've been witnessing this throughout my life in so many ways. Everything that I'm talented in, it was because I told myself I could do it, and until you're able to get that, there's it's so difficult to get anywhere in life, but you have to be able to, like, believe. So yeah, that's what I like to give to people is that belief, like, "No, you can do anything."
That's interesting that you say that. I recently listened to Will Smith's biography.
Hmm.
And when I was listening to it, he was talking about how people thought he was absolutely delusional as a
Mhm.
child, because he would make up these wild stories and he had this beautiful imagination. And because of his imagination and because of the wild stories that he was able to make up, he never thought that he couldn't be a star because his imagination was so powerful that it was just like, okay, this seems reasonable. And, I think so often we forget the power of our imagination, and in that, it diminishes us, like what you were talking about. And then also that judgment, where you were talking about how you can see people without judgment.
Mhm.
And I think that it's that moment because it's much easier to see other people without judgment than it is to see ourselves, and I think that moment that you turn that around and you're like, "Oh, well, I shouldn't be judging myself either. I wanna be a grandmother to myself. Like, why can't I
Yeah.
bring that grandma energy here?" And
Mhm.
I think it's beautiful that you described it that way because I've never really heard that, but my grandma was the closest person in the world to me, and I remember
Mm.
being overstimulated. I had a big family and I was always the quiet one. So I'd go hide in the trees and read, and the rest of my family is not quiet. And so I always felt like I was kind of like overlooked and disappeared. And I remember my grandma just taking me for a walk down to the creek by her house and actually showing me that I mattered. And so when you said that about grandma energy, that really resonated with me a
Mhm.
lot.
Aw, grandma
um,
energy.
so I'm just curious, how did you go about discovering that? I mean, you said that this has been a part of you since you were a small child, like wanting to help people. And so, what was the journey like figuring out that this was the track that you wanted to go on? Did you have a coach yourself, and that's where you decided to become one? Or what did that look like as far as the transition into this is what I want to do with my life?
So that was actually also a bit of a difficult journey, unfortunately. I I really had, like, good mentors growing up, like, quite a few really good mentors that I looked up to, um, but for whatever reason, as I was, like, choosing the paths to go down, I kept being met with these, I guess we could call them, like, gatekeepers, that's a term that you hear a lot, but I kept falling into these spaces. Like, first, I fell into the plant medicine community, um, and I really found like a lot of resonance there. That like all of my gifts were welcomed. I didn't have to pretend like I was anything that I wasn't. It gave me a space to be authentic. But unfortunately, the person that introduced me to that world burnt me really, really bad. And I was like, all right, like let's reconfigure a little bit. And then the second tattoo shop I worked at also pulled me in. At that point, I was getting ready to leave tattooing. I was like, no, I need to be helping people. And she pulled me in by saying, oh, yeah, I heal people here. We do tarot readings and sound bowls and all this stuff. And I very quickly found out that she was very, very dark, and very manipulative and not a lovely person. So that path got xed very quickly. And then after my mom had passed, I finally felt like I had some footing again, to go down this new path. And I joined a school, and unfortunately, the exact same thing happened in that school. Which was it was okay, honestly. It gave me the certifications I needed. The whole community turned on me. Not the whole community, but the few leaders that were there. Um, and I understood it, like I felt the competitive energy the second I started these classes, and I'd get onto the weekly group chats and the Zoom calls, and I could feel like that animosity, which was difficult because I really have nothing but love in my heart for people, and I'm so happy to work with others and to encourage others. So that felt like a really painful blow, because I thought I had found my community, and then it was like, no, like cast her out to the side. It was difficult, and it can still be difficult at times looking at that. Um, but it's like taught me a lot about discernment. And since then, I've landed in a couple really wonderful communities of energy workers and people that are like more aligned with what I believe in, who aren't so in it for the because it's kind of a mixed bag, the holistic wellness community. There are people that are absolutely phenomenal, that are there for all of the right reasons, who have all of the right tools in their bag. And then there are people that are there for ego and for um, money. Unfortunately, it's become like a big money grab all of a sudden. And it's kind of given like the people who are really in it for the good reasons a bad name. Um, so I think for me, it almost for a while, like I was kind of putting the spiritual side of who I am away, to make myself more digestible for everyone else. But the last few months has been a lot of, yeah, no, we're not gonna subscribe to that. We're not gonna fall for that. Like, I'm not throwing away my gifts to make you guys comfortable. Like, it's what makes me so good at what I do. Like, that's kind of like a little cheat, I get to like work with people and see them and understand them and read their energy. Like, that feels good for me. um, and I love that I'm as empathetic as I am, and I can feel physical pains that other people have. I hear things that are being channeled from things from who knows where. I love that. um, so it's kind of, while I had a lot of people to look to in my life, a lot of them have been teaching me what not to do. And that's okay, because those are teachers too. And everything that we experience in this life, I do believe, is a lesson, everything. So I've had some great teachers.
I want you to just walk us through the first step into how you became a public speaker, holistic wellness practitioner, published author, professional artist, multifaceted musician, outdoor trail guide.
um, I think it's just kind of been this carpet that's been laid out in front of me. I'm naturally gifted in creative things, which is great. Um, and it all just kind of turned into one big thing somehow, where now who I am is like almost an essence, so when I do public speaking, I'm also incorporating music. And when I'm doing public speaking, I'm bringing in the holistic wellness information that I have for people. In my book, it's all about everything that I love, even when I'm out like doing the trail hikes with people. Um, it's all of it. I'm singing on the trail to people. I'm teaching them about grounding, and like, let's touch this moss together. Like, everything that I do has somehow just become its own entity. And it's kind of beautiful. Don't think I've ever looked at that way before, that somehow I've just been like crafted into this little thing. And yeah, a lot of hard practice for sure too, to get decent at some of the things that I do. But yeah.
All right, there's a question that we ask everyone before we close. Um, so, being in the black means being in a positive place. In your own life, what does being in the black look like for you?
Being in the black would be being encapsulated with love, whether it's coming from those outside of me or just the love that I carry inside of me. Just wading in a pool of love and kindness and goodness. Yeah, yeah, that would be it.
That's so awesome. Beautiful. Where can our listeners find you?
They can find my book, To Self with Love, on Amazon. It's for sale. in hard copy and also Kindle. I'd be happy to connect with anyone on social media. My name is Alexandra Caceres on Facebook. I have too many Instagrams to name them. I'm on TikTok and I'm also on LinkedIn. So those are my home bases right now.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of In the Black. I hope today's story left you feeling inspired and reminded of the incredible strength that lies in each of us. Our guest today has taken her toughest challenges and transformed them into something beautiful, reminding us all that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way to find light in the world.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe and share In the Black with another woman who could use a little encouragement. Together, we're building a community of passion, purpose, and power. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and remember your story matters. Your choices change things, and being your most authentic self can and will change the world around you.